Welcome back to MineWarp. The MineWarp Podcast is, of course, where we discuss everything upcoming and new and also established in the world of mining technology, focusing on digital technology, but also encompassing everything automation, electrification, and essentially all the new technologies that are shaping and shifting mining into the future. Today, we're joined by a leader of a game-changing analytics platform, I guess I should say. We'll learn together much more about that. Our guest today is Shaun Mitchell. He is CEO of MaxMine. That's an Australian Adelaide-based company, helping to boost productivity and safety and sustainability using high-resolution data and AI, insight, and behavior-based coaching and consulting. If I got that right, welcome to the MineWarp Podcast, Shaun.
Thanks, MP. Lovely to be here, and yes, great summary, pretty spot on. Well done.
Okay, excellent. That always helps when you get the first part right. So, yeah. Talking about getting it right, Shaun, you are fairly new in this role as CEO at MaxMine. I guess new is in the eye of the beholder also. But tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, how you got into this role. You joined MaxMine, if I'm correct, in October 2024. So that's just under a year ago. So do tell us a little bit more about yourself, please.
Sure. So I guess the first thing to point out is that I'm a nerd from way back. So I started my career as a software developer and realized
welcome to the club.
Realized I was a much better manager than I am a software developer. But I've had very diverse, I guess, background when it comes to industries. Everything from digital media, retail, construction, license plate recognition and smart cities.
Oh, wow.
And more recently, 5 years in defence. So, but with all of those, they've always been tech. So that's a passion and a skill, and that's something that I've always loved working in, mainly in businesses that either in startup or scale up. So some of those small to medium organisations, often with very big customers. So
it's interesting that you use the word startup and scale up in the same sentence as defence, because it would seem to me like, well, I'm sure there's lots of innovation there, but also that you can't really use non-robust technology there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was having this chat recently with someone when it comes to technology and talking about horizons, and defence has a 20-year horizon, and you try and do that with technology, that becomes very difficult. So there is this constant renewal that's going on with defence, but with a very long sort of view. But so many businesses, though, have to go through that secondary evolution. So the last one I was at was actually a 25-year-old company. So even to call it scale up, but we very much felt we were in that startup phase again. So it was a refresh and renewal pace.
I had a lot of dealings with IBM a few years ago, and they, during the time where they changed over from a hardware-focused company more to a software and consulting-based company, and they talked about themselves also as a N-year-old startup, and GE also did the same kind of thing when they went through their whole digital transformation, and it seems like reinvention is the name of the game when it comes to staying ahead in the world of innovation. Now, speaking of reinvention, your career wasn't always in management. So coming from the roles across defense and ERP and software and so on, how's that kind of diverse background shaped your leadership to be ready for a mining tech company?
It's a great question. I think as much as some of these industries are quite different in the nuance, the language, the marketplace they operate in, the challenges for a tech business, though, are very similar. And I've always been quite astounded when I sort of do go into some of these new businesses and I look at some of those challenges, whether it's the product vision and trying to get the product roadmaps and prioritization right, whether it's the sales part of the organization and how you deal with such a small company dealing with very big customers. So when it was defense, it was 13 defense forces that I was dealing with huge budgets and procurement processes. But then you go to MaxMine and we're dealing with the Glencores of the world and the Rio Tintos or the Kinrosses, and they're huge organizations with a global reach.
Of course.
And we're this little minnow from Adelaide saying, hello, we're here. So I think for me, coming into MaxMine, when I looked at that and I looked at the team, and I actually joined initially I was doing some consulting between roles and with our exec chair, Tom, and I was helping them just with the execution and the strategy and sort of saying, well, how do we go about matching that sort of longer term horizon? And the team were very focused on the next year. And we sort of worked on that. And it became very clear that there was this great set of engineers, a really good product, a pretty good addressable market with 600 surface mines globally that we could sort of, tap into. And it was a little bit of a diamond in the rough, though. So there were a whole lot of things to sit there and address about the way the business was going about things. And that's the challenge that I love, is getting those things right when the product fundamentally is a good one and the people are fundamentally good. You're already more than halfway there. So it's just about getting things lined up and hitting the market hard.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. And I obviously in preparation for the podcast read up a lot about MaxMine and about you on the website, and I noticed you've got an aggressive growth strategy going on. So I'll want to ask you a little bit later maybe about that growth strategy and how you kind of keep things together in such a time of growth, because it has its own challenges. But let's reserve that for a little bit later.
Sure.
Let's talk about the platform and the tech a little bit first. So, your platform captures everything from engine revs to speeds and queuing time and strut health and you name it. And then you, if I understand correctly, you put AI and coaching between the numbers and the mine site. So can you walk us through that? Through that approach, maybe the three pillars of capturing data and then doing analytics with AI, and then adding the coaching pillar to the mix. How does that work, and how does MaxMine manage that mix?
Sure. So you're right. The first part of sort of three pillars is that data capture. And I guess in the industry, our sort of claim to fame is that we do capture more than anything else, and we do that in a platform agnostic way, so OEM agnostic. We've got probably about 130 vehicles. And it's probably important to note that at the moment we deal mainly in what we call the load and haul. So it's the excavators and the haul trucks.
And mostly for open pit surface mines.
Yeah, open pit. There's a separate set of challenges that come with underground mining that we have avoided at this stage, and we try to be really good at what we do. And I think that's important for businesses.
Yeah, focus is key.
Yeah. So we've often been tempted, and people have said, it's not a big change to go from here to here. And we're like, we need to do what we do well and focus on that. So that data capture, so everything that we can get off a bus that we can connect it to in a vehicle, we pull down. The real magic in that data capture, though, other than we do what we call store and forward, so we'll hold all of that data until we can get some connectivity. And whether that's LTE or Wi-Fi, then as it comes back to our cloud-based servers, we have a whole lot of data scientists and AI that will do what we call labeling and classification and synchronization from a time perspective. So you've got to synchronize all these events from GPS and etc., so that we can pull all that on a near live map and classifying all that data so that it's actually usable for the AI side. Once we've got that, and we have about 14 million hours of that data that we've collected from a number of customers, so there's a huge, from training perspective and AI, there's a massive amount. We then create a whole lot of insights. We have sort of Power BI reporting and a bunch of other things in our product, and that ends up largely in two places. So it either ends up inside the mines on huge sort of what we call wallboards or displays with real-time reporting. And it also comes to our team. And then the third part, which you talked about, is the coaching. So if I take you through, typically if someone says they're interested, our coaches go in and they say, like many consultants, what's keeping you up at night with your mind? Not unusual in that approach. Once we do that, we've got about 120 different sort of levers or parts of the value driver chain that we are looking at. So
all right.
You mentioned some of them, but it could be payload, it could be haul road conditions, it could be idling, queuing, all these different things. But typically they fall into three main categories even at that stage. So it's, I need better productivity, I want to get more tons, or I want to be able to reduce my cost of ton and be more efficient. That leads into the benefits around environmental improvements, carbon reduction, those sorts of things.
Yep.
And then the last one is safety. So you know yourself, it's, you know, large machines in mining and human beings, there's always a risk if behaviours aren't right that things can go wrong. And that can be death at the worst case, but it can be a lot of soft tissue injuries and other things in the short term and loss of productivity. So we come in and we say, what are those challenges you want to focus on initially? And much like a business might do with OKRs and key results, we say, let's focus on X number of those levers to begin with. Right. We use the data to sit there and work out where they're at currently, set a new target, and then the coaches come in to sit there and actually hold the hand. So a lot of the other big miners, when they talk about these systems, will often talk about their fleet management, which is different. Ours is very much business improvement. We have a piece called Pulse that does some of that fleet management and dispatch. But when it comes to the impact product, which is the one that does the business improvement, most of the changes will require some behavior change from the humans on site. So the coaches are there to do a number of things, set those targets, and then actually help change the mining operating system, and to help devise the other bits and pieces that will do that. So I'll give you an anecdote. We had a site in Queensland that was having some issues with safety, and we said there's some near misses and skids and minor bumps and things. And we looked and found that they were having a large amount of speeding events. And so the great part with what we had is we could set up reporting that would effectively provide evidence of that speeding right down to the driver. Was it a corner, a ramp, et cetera, et cetera?
Right. And who and where.
Exactly, right? So and with no argument, right?
Right.
And so then the coaches sit there with the safety team and say, okay, so how do you want to enforce this? Because without some sort of warning or whatever, they said we want to do 2 warnings and then you're off. And then we said, great, let's help you devise the reporting. And within 1 month, they went from the speeding events dropped by 97% and has remained at that level. So down to about 3 or 4% as an average. So it's an amazing, when you start, it's that classic, if you want to change it, you got to track it.
Yeah. No, that's true. And you cannot manage what you don't measure, I guess. That's an old one. But it's really absolutely so. Yeah. On that point, I started my career in mining in software development of health and safety solutions, and we would develop these fantastic solutions and then implement them at mines with great executive support and so on. But there was also always not only the fear of, but the very real kind of pushback that we got from people on the on the shop floor who would be against being micro monitored, I guess in the first place, and just would be afraid of the ramifications on themselves and so on. And then against that backdrop of fear of oversight, you now add to the mix AI and AI recommendations and so on. And so when I read about that, I thought to myself, how do you build trust in AI recommendations among, real miners, operators and supervisors and so on? That must be a challenge that you have to deal with continuously.
It's a really good point. I mean, miners, with the chaos that they often have to deal with, and they're constantly being bartered with potential silver bullets about how they can improve their mines. And probably as an industry, they would have to be one of the biggest group of skeptics that I've ever met.
Yeah, and with reason.
Absolutely good reason, right? And, we're very conscious of, even with the amazing amount of data set we have, it's still only part of the picture, right? We're not doing the geo services and the blasts. We're not doing big data like weather. So there's so many other factors that can still come into there. So there's probably two parts there. At the operator level, and trying to get that buy-in there, what we've found is gamification makes a big difference. So we have these leaderboards and league tables where they can sit there and they actually get rewarded. So it's the carrot as well as the stick. So, and I think that's a very important part for adoption, right? That said, we had one case I remember up in that example I was giving you, and a young lady was driving. She couldn't log in, so she assumed the system was down and then did a whole lot of speeding. And her manager said to her, "What's happened? Why? You're normally so good." And she goes, "I didn't think the system was working." So it's that classic one where, if you don't think the light's being shined down on you, you might do something different.
No, that's
but
true.
With the AI though, which is a really good point that you raise, we talk about there's a term called explainable AI or XAI, and I think that is a really key part in something like mining. You can't just say, "We recommend you move these haul trucks from this excavator to this one, or stop doing this or start doing that," without some underlying data. So otherwise you're just going to get, "I just don't trust this." And you only have to get it wrong once, and that's it.
Reputation is out the door.
Back to my paper reports. I don't want to know about it. So we very much do take that into consideration and provide as much backup information as we can as to why. So here's the underlying report if you want to look at it. And the recommendation might even come with a clarification, or here's some other things to check. So
I guess there's a continuous, or maybe a continuum between descriptive analytics that tells you what has happened, and that cannot go away. Reporting is the cornerstone of knowing what is happening on your site, and whatever the interval of reporting is as appropriate for the problem that you're trying to solve. And then it goes from that descriptive analytics to predictive maybe analytics. What would happen if you carry on the way that you're doing the work that you are doing, which you can never do unless you have that descriptive part in place. And then you can take that predictive analytics and do a bit of simulation maybe with it and so on. So there's lots of room for AI and lots of smarts that can be applied there, and that can never be done in the absence, well, maybe never is a strong term, but certainly I believe the presence of experienced business coaches is critical in that mix. And then you get to the prescriptive analytics parts, which tells you, all right, this is what we suggest you should do if you want to reach this target or avoid that hazard or whatever it is. And of course, the Holy Grail, we're moving into cognitive, which is almost conversational. Do this now, or what about this? Have you considered that kind of thing? But it seems like you're on that maturity curve that brings AI into the real day-to-day practice of the operator on the mine.
Absolutely. And the way we've tackled it as we do our proof of concepts at the moment on that delivery side is very much looking at, okay, there is a hierarchy from a general manager, mine manager, superintendent down to an operator. And you refer to those intervals, we call them the decision support frequencies. As a GM, I don't need to be looking at day-to-day. I'm looking at month stats, and my focus actually might be on different KPIs altogether. And it gets obviously more granular and specific as you work your way down. So that AI should be the same way even those various levels of support. So we're very much focused with that. You get down to potentially that sort of supervisor level, and it might be that, we actually have, okay, we've noticed, you mentioned before, like a turbo is not working well on one of the trucks. It might be, hey, we're letting you know that this truck is falling behind. It's causing queuing. we suspect it's the turbo. You should consider some maintenance and parking that up, either at end of shift or now. And the result will be this if you don't.
Right.
And be able to have that actually convert to voice and actually come over the radio and be able to have a voice response which sends back to dispatch, right?
A Siri for mining.
Yeah, because these guys are sitting out there. You would have seen it before, right? An open pit mine, they're there with binoculars at a lookout and working out of their light vehicle, their LV. So it can't only be as a wallboard back in the crib room or their office. It needs to be in their car on their phone. So we're trying to bring that decision support directly to where it's needed in a timely fashion. But as you say, we've got to keep that human in the loop wherever we can to make sure that they're making the right decisions.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess as we move into a world of more younger people coming into mining who are digital natives, they are used to interacting with technology in that way, then it's also easier and there'll be less resistance. As a matter of fact, I think there'll be a pull more than a push,
100%.
So that's something to look forward to, and it's always exciting to see when companies start embracing that move into into the new world. All right, so I mentioned earlier, and you did too, about the scaling and growth targets and so on that you have. I've been involved in go-to-market strategies for mining companies, mining technology companies for many years now, and it seems to me like there's lots of data that tells us, okay, here's an addressable market. All right, but often with tech companies that deal with telematics and getting lots of data off of the machine, they have to tread so carefully that they don't end up with a what instead of a why. So I have this data. Wonderful. Why is it necessary? So do you, in your engagement with mines, you asked a question earlier or mentioned what keeps you up at night, but do you have typical business cases that you tender for, or do you typically approach mines to help them solve problems, or do you respond on RFQs, or how do you find business that is, in a world where you are not selling widgets off the shelf?
Yeah, so there's probably two paths now with the level of maturity that we're at. Very few times would we be responding to a tender, and there's a cultural piece too, which typically happens in Southeast Asian countries, but in fact happens in mining a bit. Part of what we're in the why, or rather than talk about ourselves and what we've got, is we're sort of having to get mines to admit that they're not doing it right. They're leaving something on the table, right?
And that's a tough one without, making them feel like you're wrapping them over the knuckles.
That's right. Someone sitting there busting a gut, head office is telling them to do this, do that. And we're saying, look, you're 80% there, and we're going to come in on a white horse and fix all this for you. And so there's going to be a natural resistance there, right? It's like, I don't want to hang out my dirty laundry and tell you what's going on. So for a lot of that, we use consultants who are already in there and have engagement. You find that, and you would have seen again in your career, there's quite a bit of movement in mining. During COVID, when certain areas will drag as certain commodities go up in price, and they'll pull from one to the other. And so that creates an alumni of people too that you can follow and talk to, and will have an appreciation of your product or service. But it is a tough one to sit there and have that initial conversation to say, look, I think we can offer you a 12 or 15% return on what you're getting now, or 12, sorry, or 15% improvement in your mind, right? The skepticism suddenly comes out. So then you go to do case studies, but again, even with the case studies, it's often very hard to name another customer because they don't want to put their hand up and say, yeah, we weren't doing it right. We're doing it right now.
I had so much fat.
Yes, that's right. I was missing out on this. Sorry, shareholders.
Yeah.
So it is a challenge. And then you get, of course, in the big organizations, all the procurement and IT and all the other parts. Oh. But we do go direct. But now that we've got, more than a dozen customers or sites, I should say, what we're finding is we can also do the land and expand. So when you've got, whether it's a contractor like an NRW or McMahon, or it's one of the other big miners that I talked about, they're seeing that benefit. And so that conversation about, well, you've got another 8 mines, can we start talking to some of your sister mines here and look at that? So that's one angle, and then the other is the straight new business. As part of trying to get that aggressive growth strategy, we've actually taken on, in fact, a whole lot of current mining consultants who are sort of working more on a commission basis, who can have those conversations. The good part about what they do, they've either worked with us before and they've often worked in many of these mines, and they know the C-suite, because you can come in and you can talk to a safety person or even a mine manager, but really they're not decision makers in this process. There's a bit of bottom up and you want to get that support, but really you've got to come in GM and above to really get anywhere. So they help reduce, I guess, that sales cycle, which can be long, can be like 18 months, but we can remove nearly 6 months of that by getting straight to some of the decision makers. And then trials are often a part of that as well.
Oh, yes. So that's an interesting one. I published an article just last week, or I think 2 weeks ago, talking about the expectation from mines. I was actually speaking with a mine manager in Brazil just before I published this, and he kind of reminded me of it again. The expectations from mines to be able to try before they buy. But it is a tough one because mines, don't always realize that they're working with small companies. I mean, looking at MaxMine, what are you, about 50 people odd? If I looked correctly. Thereabouts. So it's not as if you've got endless resources to spend doing free work on a mine, and what that then means is there has to be a partnership that develops between you and the mine. And do you find that kind of is a durable partnership? It lasts for a while, or is it mainly consultative selling to get tech out there and then move on to the next customer?
Another great question. Because of the hardware installation and that CapEx cost of us getting that there and into a remote site, and they're all remote, being mining sites, we generally go in with an agreement to proceed if we hit certain KPIs in that trial.
Okay.
So so there is risk, and that risk is significant because often we are reliant on a lot of the teams on the ground. So we're trying to get network connectivity, and the IT team sort of dragging their, sort of going, oh, this is another tech company coming in with something else. Yeah, we'll sort out their connectivity and get them behind the firewall, or we'll do this and we'll do that. But each day or week that goes past, we're missing that opportunity to demonstrate our capability. And that can even happen in the medium term. Often some customers say, look, we'll do the maintenance, we'll look after your product until there's something else that's burning over there. And then we get deprioritized, and that's a real risk. So we try and manage the situation end to end. But you're right, with only 50 people, and you can't outsource everything because you need to have a level of control, and it's not a simple product. So
that kind of brings me to the question about your role, your leadership role in this time of change from startup to scale up and beyond. So my question is, how are you building a culture that balances that rapid growth with team cohesion and technical rigor? Because you don't want to build technical debt as you get more and more customers, and I almost want to say inevitably make more and more promises that you have to then catch up with. How do you do that?
Yeah, So first thing on the product side is to say, and I've said with the team, culturally, we've actually got a product that sells. We don't need to necessarily go and build out a new thing. We want to continue to innovate, but it shouldn't be a customize. I think that's quite a different thing. Now, if someone says, is there a slight tweak to something in a report? That's not a problem. In our reports, we can do that very quickly. If someone says, I want different functionality, we say, no, we stick to what we do. I think that makes a massive difference. And I've been in that place before, and it's a world of pain. If you're doing that, you're building all sorts of problems. So this is what we provide. So we've very much worked on the standard offering, and that's both from a product, but also a technical. These are our SLAs. This is our approach. And if you want something slightly different in that, then we'll actually charge you extra for that. There's been a level of maturity to say, actually, we do a damn good job at what we do, and we're happy to back it. So I think that's been important. And then it's the systems to make sure that we can deliver as well. So in that scale-up phase, it's, do we understand if we got 3, 4, 5 sites in rapid succession, how would we manage that? So we've put a lot of work into the back-end systems around automation, project management, delivery, where I think there's a bit more of an ad hoc approach previously to dealing with that. We'll just go, we'll figure it out. If we get that many sales, woohoo, that's a good problem to have. It's easy to say that.
It's still a problem.
It can be the undoing of some companies, right? Because suddenly you either said your service dip or you just can't deliver, and I don't want to see that. So very much, when I talk about, I think it's in my LinkedIn profile, I'll often talk about sustainable growth. And it's not a bingo team. For me, it's really important that we can actually sit there and continue to deliver that on an upward curve. We've also got the challenge of CapEx. And as I said, that hardware we amortize. So the whole solution for a mine is a subscription, which helps with the sale process you were asking about before, because often that'll get in under the CapEx budgets and those sorts of things. So, which is great.
Does that mean then that you carry that cost?
For the first year. So often, that's right.
Sure.
So
I guess that's very brave, right? That also tells you that you're backing your own horse here, isn't it?
Yeah. So a lot of them will have a clause for convenience in there, which if I can negotiate that out, I will. But you're right. And we are saying we will back that product. We believe we will hit those targets and we will demonstrate them to you. And we do that monthly. We don't wait till the end of the projects. We're part of their steer co, part of their stand-up meetings, and we should be embedded very strongly with everything that they do. And it's worked out really well as a result.
Now, this kind of they-them relationship can sometimes get a little bit out of hand. Mining is notoriously cyclical, right? And your tech has to address needs across those cycles. And so how do you position the value proposition differently when mines are chasing, for example, cost reductions versus growth? Do you find that you have to talk differently then, or is it merely different problems that they solve?
Probably more the latter. So we have every month we get these set of reports about 500 pages long, which we then divide up into all the customers. We can also provide some benchmarking for other sites, which they're often quite interested in. We can say, if you want to look at coal sites, you want to look at hard rock sites, or you want to look at specifically gold, we can help you compare to some of our other customers so you can see where you sit. But it's very much going month by month and showing whatever those levers are, because they will change. So someone might start, and it could be a commodity price that changes the reason, right? You might have a lithium miner where the price has dropped out of the market, and so they're really struggling to keep things afloat until that returns. And so it's very much about that cost per ton and how to do that well and the efficiency. And then you might be looking at gold miners that we have. We're just saying, I'm ready to mine the waste again. Like we can't dig enough fast enough. And so they are two very different problems to look at, and we target the reporting around that and the coaches. And so we are talking their language with those coaches, and that's why a coach might only have 2 or 3 sites that they look after, and they are embedded all the way up the management tree, and they speak their language, whatever that is.
So you're trading that interesting boundary, I guess, between a a traditional B2B sale, albeit maybe one that is financed slightly differently, and a true software as a service business. It's hard to do a software as a service model strictly when you have a big capital layout in implementation and in equipment that you have to buy. And if I think of the kind of companies that I've worked with before, the B2B seller of equipment and technology looks at upping the average order value, right? Mm-hmm. I want to get more from the customer, or from every sale, I should say. Whereas the software as a service guy is more interested in reducing the cost of sale and reducing churn. Mm. So how do you balance those two? Because they are fundamentally different business models.
Yeah, you're right. Crazily enough, I think we try and go for both. So we're always.
Well, I think you have to, but it's not easy. And I have spoken to so many mining tech companies that know the software as a service, or let's call it just as a service route, is the way to go to remove the selling obstacle. But man, it's difficult.
It is. It absolutely is. And churn's a real risk in this one, Even it might not be anything to do with us. It might be completely at the customer side, where they just go, we're putting the mine into care and maintenance. There's nothing we can do about that.
That cyclical nature that I talked about earlier.
Exactly right. So, yeah. So, look, I think we do the software as a service part very much to sit there and help get that sale. And then in that sustainment phase and that account management space, often what we find is in that increasing amount of wallet that you might talk about, or trying to get that further, is we'll often start with a digger and some of the haul trucks, or two diggers in that. So we might start with then often that'll be what we then call, we move into the ancils. And we'll say, well, what about dozers, graders, front wheel loaders, water carts, because we've done all those as well, and that'll give you a more complete picture. And so that's part of it, and so we can grow our wallet a little bit that way. That provides us some growth, and even into the renewal phase. These are not standard sort of SaaS fees, right? They will vary quite a bit from customer to customer. So but we have to sit there and really look after the customer. That account management piece, or customer engagement, is crucial. And we know that if we're not there and constantly with them, we'll very quickly become out of sight and out of mind, and we run the risk that that value drops off.
So I'm going to extrapolate that a little bit, talking from startup to scale up and so on. Many scale up businesses, and especially ones that have a consulting capability built in, do really well in their geographic area of origin, so maybe wonderfully well connected in Australia, and then you have to move out to another continent or to another language area, and it becomes very hard to expand the company culture, the way of doing with trusted advisors in an area where you are not yet trusted. So is that something you are looking at right now, the global growth, or are you first kind of trying to conquer the Australian market?
So we're well entrenched in Africa already, in both South Africa and Mauritania. So I guess what I've said with our team is, that's, if you can work in a place like Mauritania, you can have a pretty much good go at anything. So we've taken what we've learned there, but we have boots on the ground. So we've understood that as part of the global expansion. We've got people, in fact, directors based in South Africa. What we have discovered more recently in the last few months is some of those sites, we actually try and have locals that we know in the industry. And we are extremely lucky with the network of mining consultants that we have that are global. So that extra group I talked about cover the US, South America, Europe, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. So that's pretty much all critical, which is fantastic. And then they have a network of people. So a general approach to a new area. And yes, we are going global in those areas. Well, we're reviewing each one and seeing what comes up first, is to sit there and work with usually a contractor that we can bring on board to help us with their consulting piece, and then move to bring that into a permanent role. So either with them or someone else once we start to build that out. And then the same with some of our techs and things like that. We will start with our group and go over and make sure we're setting up as, we want it to be, but then inducting people into that and say, okay, great, now we've got a local group over there. So, and I, again, have done that quite a bit when I had 13 defence forces globally, Right. So it's not the first time I've had to sort of work through that area.
Shaun, this was really a great conversation. I wish we could carry on for quite a while more. Yeah, but I want to end off, as we always do, just bringing it back to you personally, and a little bit outside of work. So what do you do outside of work to recharge, and maybe what advice, if any, do you have for other executives in your in your shoes? Any routines or mentors that keep you grounded?
So I think it's really important to look after yourself and to find what it is that does recharge your battery. So understanding what those things are, whether that's family, exercise. I've always done a lot of cycling. I used to do a lot of long distance cycling. Okay. Now there's too many people with mobile phones on the road, so I tend to go on a spin bike. So it tends to be a little bit safer.
Yeah.
So, but for me, family is a big part when we can get away on holidays. And I do photography. So I'm on a wall, which you can't see at the moment, but with my background. But even, people talk about sort of mindfulness, and for me, I can put on a macro lens and I can walk into somewhere in Queensland, and just within maybe a 2 metre by 2 metre square, I might be able to find something that's 2 or 3 millimetres, but it's absolutely fascinating, and spend my time trying to capture that for an hour or two.
Wow.
And for me, that's my mindfulness. So that's one of the things. But the other part I would say to, any executives when they're, and it's tough, I think, for a lot of technical people to make that change. I'm actually thinking of writing something to that effect, a bit of help, because I think many people I've seen as I've mentored along the way get to a point in their career and they say, oh, do I go commercial or do I stay technical? They love what they do, but they feel like they're tapping out. And not all of us can be a founder of a Zuckerberg or a Musk. So then it's that real decision point, right? And so I often sort of guide people to have a real good think about what it is they love to do. And so you can be a technical expert and get a good wage, but if you want to go commercial, great, but there's a bunch of things you need to do to sit there and prepare yourself for that and let go a little bit of that technical. Not completely, but you have to have really good routines, up early, most times 5:30. You're in there reviewing things, and I spend a lot of time making sure I make myself available to my team, because without a good team behind me, I'm just a fancy mouthpiece.
Yeah, no, that's true. I remember distinctly the conversation I had with our then CEO. I was driving back from holiday. At that time, I had a very senior technical role, and he called me up and he said to me, MP, I want to ask you, how would you feel about taking on the, establishing a business development, which at that time was sales and marketing kind of together in the young company role? And I was at that crossroads that you talk about now, to make the decision, am I going to take the leap or not? And so it's a pivotal time in every person's career. I'll certainly read the book if you write it.
Well, I've started laying it out. We'll see how we go time. But it is that sliding doors moment. I think all of us who have managed to sort of progress, and often talk about going on the dark side, when I leave being the nerd and going to the commercial. But I think we all remember that spot, right? When we did make that decision to sit there and move across and do something else. But it can be extremely rewarding if it's something you enjoy doing. You've got to want to work with people, and if that's the case, then it can be terrific fun.
So, guys, that's a wrap for today. I guess it's the MineWarp Podcast episode for today. Thank you very much, Shaun Mitchell, CEO of MaxMine, for candid answers and really good insights, and also a bit of a looking behind the scenes of what goes on in your company and the way that you approach things. I think it was very insightful and even inspirational to see how you are bringing together new ideas, new ways of thinking, and adding that into real value for mines. So thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome, and very happy to chat again. It was great fun. Thank you.
So everyone, that's it. And I will be writing something about this episode also on the LinkedIn blog. Keep an eye out for that, and do comment and even feel free to ask more questions to help us dig a little bit deeper in future. Until next time, bye now.